All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight for this issue of the Regional Watersheds Advisory Board. So I'm Emma, I'm the chair. Thanks to everyone for joining, to members of the board and to all the staff we have with us tonight. So I haven't done this for a while, but I thought I'd start with a quick land acknowledgement. So I'm joining from Halifax, which is in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And I thought I'd share a resource that I was given recently called mi'kma'placenames.ca. And it's an online map of original Mi'kmaq place names in Nova Scotia that were collected over the last several years. So I definitely recommend taking a look. I found out a lot about favorite lakes and rivers and land features and what they were originally called. And you can learn a lot about original uses of the land through that map as well. So for example, I found out that Citadel Hill is called Big Pine Hill. So it kind of gives a clue as to the original land cover of the area, which is interesting. So we also thought we would bring back something that we used to do at these meetings, which were the ability to give water-related announcements when you're introducing yourself and doing your audio check. So this is kind of sprung upon you for tonight, but if for future meetings you have something that you wish to bring forward, an upcoming event or something like World Water Day, or an item of interest that will just take a minute or two to bring up, then feel free to consider that for future meetings. So during my announcement, just want to acknowledge that the news around Shubenacadie Grand Lake that we probably all heard about this morning, and the ongoing investigation into that water quality issue of concern. So we're hoping to be able to discuss that in more detail at a future meeting, and hoping that in a month from now at our July meeting, there'll be some sort of resolution that we can discuss and maybe some lessons learned for the future. So keep that in the back of your minds. So when I call your name, if you can introduce yourself if you'd like, but mainly we're just doing an audio check at the time and a video check. So I'll start off with Seo.
Hi, I'm Seo, and I have some news that is very, very preliminary. I'm working with some people at Canoe Kayak Nova Scotia to develop sort of a repertoire of sites where people can take their kayak and get into and out of that river or lake quite easily. So for people with physical disabilities or limitations. So it's just in the very initial stages of putting a working group together, but looking forward to working on that. Thanks.
Well, thanks for sharing that. The accessibility of waterways is very important. Tony.
Hi, Tony Bluen here. Hoping my audio is working. I have had a few problems, but I think I've got a good signal going now, so hopefully you can hear me. No announcements today.
Great, thanks. David?
Hello, everybody. No water-related announcements on my end. It's all trees, trees, trees these days, but maybe next month.
Great, thanks. Robert has not joined us, so we'll go to Eugene.
Hi, everyone. This is Eugene. Audio seems to be working. A bit of updates from my work, working with a few new companies around ocean plastic and plastic recycling overall. One of which is actually starting a pilot project with the municipality of Barrington in Nova Scotia. So very interesting to observe that, and very interesting to see if they can bring it to Halifax too. The company's name is Drastic Plastics.
Cool, thank you. Andrew.
Yeah, Andrew here. I guess some interesting water news is that we've been working on Chocolate Lake for the last year and just found out from our carbon-14 analysis that we'll be able to describe the last 3,000 years of Chocolate Lake's history.
Wow, that's fascinating. Thanks for sharing that. All right, so I have on my list as well the two core staff that are usually with us. Shannon, if you want to pop on.
Hi, everybody. Shannon Miedema, Manager of Energy and Environment for Halifax.
And Emma.
Hi, everybody. My name is Emma Waddy. I'm the Water Resource Specialist for Energy and Environment.
Great, thanks. We also have some great admin support from Haruka and Sharon, and a couple members of the regional planning team, but I'm assuming you'll introduce yourselves later on in the meeting. All right, so we'll move on to number 2, approval of minutes. So these are the minutes from our meeting on May 13th. Are there any errors or omissions that people would like to bring forward? Okay, not hearing anything. I need a motion to approve the minutes. And for that, I'll need a mover and a seconder.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Happy to
I'll
second.
second that.
Geez, don't all dive in at once. Perfect. I think David got in there first.
That's fine.
Don't worry, there'll be lots of other things to second. All right, so that the minutes of May 13th, 2021 be approved as presented. So all those in favor, you can raise your hand physically or digitally. Okay, so that motion carries. All right, number 3, approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Haruka, are there any additions to the agenda?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there's one added item, that's 10.1, contamination at the DIRECTIL, and consent of all members to add this item has been received, and there is no deletion.
All right, so for this, I'll also need a motion, and for that motion, I'll need a mover and a seconder. Okay, so Seo moves the motion.
I'll second it.
And Tony seconds. Thank you. So all those in favor of adding this to the agenda? Okay, perfect. So the motion carries. All right, business arising out of the minutes. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Okay, sounds like there isn't. So number 5, call for declaration of conflict of interests. Do any committee members have a conflict to declare relating to this evening's agenda? All right, seeing none. So we have no consideration of deferred business. So now we're at 7, correspondence. So originally it says there was no correspondence. However, we did receive a note recently. So this was from Shalom Mandeville, and he sent this in this morning, actually. So we're able to include it in the meeting, but he basically says he was able to view the recorded video of our May meeting, and he thanks us for officially acknowledging his email in that meeting. And he also would like to profusely acknowledge Tony for being the only HRM official who used to understand him in full during the years that he was with HRM from 1996 to 2008 or so. So even the professional staff at the Nova Scotia Environment Department did not understand as fully following the sudden resignation of their only limnologist. So, and he directs you to this website where there's a full list of deceased associates. But basically the gist of it is he's grateful that we were able to speak about it in our last meeting, and especially to Tony for his wonderful contributions in the past and present. All right, so would anyone like to make any other comments based on that correspondence? All right, so there are no petitions or presentations from the public and no information items brought forward. So now we're at number 9, staff reports. So we have an item here, Regional Plan Review, Themes and Directions Report Presentation by Leah Perrin. And I see a couple other members of the regional planning staff team are with us tonight as well. So I'll hand it over to you, Leah, if you'd like to introduce yourself and your team.
Sure, thank you. I'm going to see if I can share my screen here. I guess this one. And okay, can you see that?
Looks good.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much for having us here today. My name is Leah Perrin. I'm a principal planner with the Regional Policy Program in Planning and Development. While I have the, oh, I'm getting a notice I should start my video. There, okay. While I have the pleasure of leading the presentation today, we do have a great team of people working on this project. So the people on this slide are our core project team. But obviously a project like the regional plan cuts across the whole of our organization. So many people have been involved with the work to date, and we just want to acknowledge their contributions. So today we'll answer a few key questions. What brings us to this point in the regional plan review? Why are we here in front of you today? We'll outline how we're engaging with the public and explain our themes and directions document. And given the role of this committee is related to watershed management, I'm going to focus the discussion mostly today on our environment theme. So we're here today because we're reviewing the regional plan, which means we're evaluating our land use policies and making sure they represent the direction the council would like to set. So we're contemplating how the municipality is physically organized and growing. We kicked off this phase of public engagement on May 20th at the Community Planning and Economic Development Standing Committee, which is the primary advisory body for this work. And now just to step back and make sure everyone understands the regional plan, it is a strategic document. It was the first planning document adopted after amalgamation that provided a region-wide vision for land use. It was first adopted in 2006 and provided a comprehensive outline of how growth and development should take place until 2031. The regional plan is a powerful document that guides the municipality's planning and decision-making. As a high-level policy document, it does a few different things. So first, the plan provides policy direction for planning at the regional and at community level. So the regional plan really sits kind of on top of our community or secondary plan level documents and above our land use bylaws and sets that region-wide policy intent. The regional plan can set up land use bylaw regulations that would be applied region-wide. So for example, our regulations around watercourse buffers, around our coastal elevation requirements, those policies sit in the regional plan and then they shoot right down into our land use bylaws at the community level. The regional plan can establish the municipality's intent to do future research or studies. So I'll speak a bit today about how the regional plan originally set up the intent to do what became the Halifax Green Network Plan. And now with the adoption of that plan, there's ongoing work related that will get its own kind of specific policy direction in the regional plan. And then where there are needs for different types of programming or opportunities to partner with community or other levels of government. So this committee is likely familiar with the proposed water quality monitoring program, which talks about a role for community. So the regional plan can sort of set a policy direction to support that kind of work. So this slide shows the progression of the regional plan over the past sort of 15 years or so. So 2006, we approved the first regional plan, and in 2014, we finalized the first review. And we're aiming to complete this review in 2022. Now, this isn't to say that this work sort of stops between those periods. We're in a state of kind of continual improvement. So I mentioned that the plan can set up future work. So the 2006 and 2014 plans identified a need to do like an open space plan, a road network plan, a cultural plan, a climate change plan. And so we've been doing that work all along. And in the last couple of years, I've adopted the Halifax Green Network Plan, the Integrated Mobility Plan, Halifax 2050, and we'll be adopting the Sharing Our Stories Cultural and Heritage Priorities Plan hopefully soon. And so the regional plan can really be a powerful tool in setting up change. Here's a more detailed look at our timeline. So the project is broken down into 3 major phases. We are in phase 2 and are conducting public engagement at the moment, which includes this presentation to you today. And once this phase ends, we'll go away and we'll continue to work on the work program that we've identified through the themes and directions document. And then we'll come back with our first draft regional plan in 2022. So we have a heavy engagement program planned for this month, and we're consulting with committees of council, advisory boards, and internal staff teams, as well as stakeholders and the broader public. The website is our one-stop shop for information all related to the plan review. So that is on the bottom of the slide here, shapeyourcityhalifax.ca/regional-plan. So here's just a quick peek at our website on the right side of the slide and some important dates on the left. We have a survey that is live until July 16th. We have scheduled a series of live virtual Q&As starting tomorrow and then with 5 others next week. They're all in different topic areas. The environment theme is being presented on June 15th at 6:30 p.m. So with all that sort of project management detail out of the way, we can dig into the material a little bit deeper. So the themes and directions document was released on May 20th, as I mentioned, and it shares the key planning ideas, the issues at play. It outlines the potential changes that we're proposing to make. It really documents kind of the high-level scope of the work and gives us a chance to ask everyone if we're heading in the right direction. And the feedback we'll receive through this process will help to provide the focus and direction on the remainder of the work plan. So the themes and directions document includes 11 themes. I'll read them quickly. They are considering the regional scale, building healthier and more complete communities, reconsidering employment and industrial lands, transforming how we move in our region, social planning for community well-being, celebrating culture and heritage, integrating community parks and facilities, enhancing environmental protection, leading through action on climate, imagining HRM into 2050 and beyond, and assessing the impacts of COVID-19. So I'm going to focus on the environment theme today. In addition to the main document, we also have released a series of issue papers on some topic areas that have been of particular interest to council and community. Those are just listed on the slide here, and they're available on our website as well. So we'll focus on theme 8 today, which is called Enhancing Environmental Protection. Environmental management was one of the core underpinnings of the regional plan when it was first adopted. The 2006 regional plan identified that the natural environment is one of HRM's defining features, and the plan really homed in on this idea that growth and development in HRM has been and would continue to be shaped by a network of open space. The plan set up that when planning for new communities, we should start by examining these spaces on a watershed basis. And we furthered that understanding now with the Halifax Green Network Plan, and that provides a high-level overview of the areas and features that contribute to the region's green network. The Green Network Plan is being implemented through many different ongoing initiatives across the organization, but our work on the regional plan review will be really instrumental in making sure that our region-wide policy is consistent with that plan. So we'll be looking to complete some additional study and do some work through this process. So for example, I'll talk today about a little bit about naturalization and the protection of natural corridors, water resources in coastal areas, and I'll get to the next few slides. So our so-called open space primer, one of the issue papers that we have posted is titled Planning Tools for Protecting and Conserving Land. So we've been asked a number of times by community members, by council, about whether the municipality should be asking the province for changes to the HRM charter. There were some requests that were made when the Green Network Plan was adopted. But in the meantime, HRM does have some tools available to us to regulate development to better protect significant environmental lands. So that's our focus at the time, is we're trying to sort of figure out how can we best work with the tools that we have. So one of the strongest tools that we have is limiting significant residential subdivision outside of the urban service area. The regional plan and the regional subdivision bylaw already do that. That was sort of one of the most key pieces of regulation in the original 2006 plan, was our growth boundary. We are also able to prohibit development in certain circumstances, for example, around drinking water sources in flood-prone areas, or whether it's steep slopes, or where it's low-lying or marshy. So we're continuing to explore the full range of planning tools that are available at the municipality, and we'll be continuing to do that through the regional plan review. One major aspect of the Green Network Plan is the idea of natural corridors, which are typically undeveloped areas that provide linear connections between larger patches of wilderness. These corridors are extremely important as they connect habitats and help to maintain healthy and diverse wildlife populations. The Halifax Green Network Plan identified the need for a clear approach to protecting natural corridors as the region grows and develops. The Green Network Plan identifies these corridors at a high level, but where our regulations work at the site level, there's some additional study needed to understand how we can best protect those corridors, on the regional scale in our land use bylaw regulations. We expect the regional plan review will set up for that future study. The Halifax Green Network Plan and Halifax both encourage the inclusion and maintenance of natural areas and green infrastructure in communities where growth is located or planned. And the Urban Forest Master Plan as well provides direction for planning, programming, and maintaining HRM's urban forest. Natural areas and green infrastructure help to manage stormwater, reduce the heat island effect, improve water quality, provide shade, and sequester carbon. So this kind of naturalization work is already being piloted in HRM to improve the environmental health in our urban areas, and we'll continue to make sure that we have the right support we need in the regional plan policy to continue. Protecting the municipality's water resources is critical for our potable water supply, supporting wildlife and overall ecological health, recreation use, and aesthetic values. The regional plan directs land use policy to regulate water flow, mitigate flooding, reduce water pollution, and protect ecological function. Through the regional plan review, we will both be supporting ongoing work and looking at ways to update our existing regulations. Some ongoing work includes the proposed water quality monitoring program, which I understand has recently come to this committee. So assuming that this proposed approach is adopted by council, we would write regional plan policy that supports that work. Where the proposed program involves working with community, we would make sure that the policy is laid out so we can continue to build those partnerships. Another ongoing piece of work has been on stormwater management. So our infrastructure planning group has been working with Halifax Water on updating the joint stormwater standards, first for large scale developments on private property. And then they're continuing to work on the municipal design guidelines of the so-called Red Book review, which is looking at the public right-of-way and how green infrastructure can be used more widely. The regional plan includes policy and sets up land use regulations for riparian buffers around watercourses, and there is some regulation around wetlands, which aims to protect these features from being damaged by development. The Halifax Green Network Plan identified that there is a need to further protect riparian areas and establish a consistent watercourse buffer across the region. There is a need for greater protection for wetlands also in our policies, as these areas improve or serve important roles for natural stormwater management, provide wildlife habitat, and act as carbon sinks. So we're intending to review those policies and regulations and make updates where we're able. And finally, the regional plan sets out requirements for studying environmental features before development can take place for new communities, new service communities. And so we'll continue to do that as we're planning for future growth. And finally, regarding coastal protection, we expect that sea level rise and extreme water levels exacerbated by increased frequency and intensity of storms will significantly impact the Atlantic coast. As a result of climate change, HRM can expect significant impacts from sea level rise and extreme water levels in coastal areas, including flooding, saltwater intrusion, and coastal erosion, all of which can significantly damage infrastructure, property, and natural features. As a result, it's important to limit damage to coastal communities and ecosystems by carefully managing development in these areas. The regional plan does set out vertical setback requirements that are implemented through various community land use bylaws, but we've identified a few gaps in the way that that regulation works. The province is continuing to work on the Coastal Protection Act regulations, and we've been meeting with Department of Environment to understand that proposed approach. We're hopeful that our timelines will align so that we'll be in a position to adopt revised regulations, policies and regulations that are consistent with that provincial act and also tailored to the HRM context. If our timelines don't align, there are likely still some adjustments that we can make to our own policies to strengthen them in the meantime. So this is our key contact information. We're happy to take questions and comments from you today, as we've been meeting with different committees where suggesting that this committee might like to submit a letter to us after today's meeting, or if individual committee members would like to submit comments to us, we're certainly happy to accept those. And obviously the minutes from this meeting will be part of the public record, will be part of our engagement process. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.
Great, thanks so much, Leah. So at this time, I think it makes most sense to first go through the list of names again in the same order that we did our introductions. And then from there, if it makes sense, we can do a more open discussion and questions. So Seo, you're first if you have a question or comment that you'd like to make.
Yeah, I understand this is a high-level policy document and about policy direction, so it's very, very big picture, but there are terms that are used like green infrastructure and stormwater management, and I'm wondering if there are plans for other documents, because it probably wouldn't fit in this document, but maybe in text boxes or whatnot, but just to flesh out, I mean, what does that mean, right? I mean, what are good practices for stormwater management? What have we learned from other jurisdictions? What have we learned from our own history? It sort of, you know, I felt I needed things to make it more concrete. So, you know, and what sort of new policies, I mean, policies are referred to in sort of a, you know, very general way, but what sorts of policies are being contemplated or thought about to encourage better stormwater management, not only stormwater management, but, you know, dealing with stormwater on the property, for example. There's not much talk about stormwater prevention. It's more like management. So, but we know that hardening of surfaces during development is sort of the key source of stormwater issues. So, you know, how can that be addressed at the source? How can that be minimized, whether through, you know, just green roofs or rain barrels or you know, these ideas that have been used in other communities. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it lacked a certain tangible sense to me of what it means. I'm not sure whether that, you know, should be done in this document, maybe a companion piece that would flesh out, you know, here are some of the best practices. Here's how you can prevent stormwater issues. There was also a reference to quality versus quantity. So definitely quality and quantity of stormwater are both important issues. But I felt it, you know, hard to really grasp what exactly we were talking about. What's the toolkit? What's what's being contemplated? What are other jurisdictions doing? Sort of a more tangible discussion. Thank you.
Sure, I can respond to that through the chair to the member. Thank you very much for that comment. I think, yeah, exactly. You're getting at the sort of issue with the regional plan. It is this high level policy document that's meant to support much more work. So, I often say that I'm not really the subject matter expert. I'm relying on everyone around me who is the subject matter expert to sort of, they're doing that more detailed work, and we're just making sure that this sort of high level policy is supportive of the work. So, certainly I know our colleagues in infrastructure planning, when they've been working on these joint stormwater standards and bringing those documents to council, there would be absolutely like council reports out there that would have much more detailed information on those things. And, we can certainly provide that information to you if you're interested. I guess I take the point that you need some more examples, which is useful for us as we're continuing to do more public engagement. I don't really have I guess more answers for you at the moment, other than yes, that work is definitely ongoing, and we're here in kind of a supportive role for it.
So Leah, is it right to say that the purpose of this report is more to say these are the overall things that we're going to be looking at over the next year as we actually develop the regional plan, and are we missing anything? Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yep.
Okay, great. Sayo, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so in terms of missing anything, there was the quality quantity, this idea of stormwater management, but prevention is not there. What strategies exist to keep the water on the property and make sure, trying to make sure that it seeps through the land rather than running over the surfaces into the water courses. So the idea of prevention, I think, is missing.
Thank you. That's a useful comment. Yes, the strategies themselves, I would need to consult with my colleagues and engineers basically who work on this regularly. But certainly from a land use perspective, as a land use planner, we are regularly dealing with site design. So that's certainly something that we could manage through, through our land use file regulations, where you might have, I'm familiar with some areas that have land use file regulations that have a maximum driveway width, for example, and it's meant to have landscaping on the remainder. So there are tools that we have in our toolbox in planning around site design that can deal with that, and then the more technical engineering pieces would be dealt with by our colleagues.
Okay, great, thank you. Tony.
Hi, Leah. Just one fairly specific comment going through that regional plan review document. I'm looking at policy statement, or whatever they're called, 8.8. I think it's on page 94 of the document. And I was just, I was pleased to see that it supports the water quality monitoring program, which we understand is going ahead. So that's great. But it also references lake water management plans, which is a really interesting concept. So I would just be quite eager to see what that's going to consist of, and recognizing this document is a very high level thing. It doesn't get into the details yet, but whatever point HRM does that, I'd be interested in knowing about that. And in particular, it references establishing phosphorus loading limits for lakes, which is a great idea. I think the original regional plan did say something about trying to maintain lakes in their current trophic status, meaning how impacted are they by input of nutrients, particularly phosphorus. And so there are some methodologies you can use to model lakes and predict the impacts of different levels of development in the watershed and the resulting input of phosphorus to the lakes. And I don't know if you would be aware that some years back, the Provincial Environment Department did develop kind of a standard phosphorus model for lakes to be used in the province. And it would be similar to the models that Mr. Mandeville did provide in his data archive. So those spreadsheets do contain models, and you can use those to manipulate the inputs and determine what the impacts might be. And that's all based on work that I believe was originally done in Ontario on lake carrying capacities and what impacts would result from different types or levels of development. So I'm assuming that that's the kind of approach that you're contemplating here. So I'll just be very interested in the details once you do get to that. And my only other question would be, is there any consideration of going beyond phosphorus? That's obviously an important impactor. But, well, we have an agenda item today dealing with Lake Charles and the levels of arsenic that are in Lake Charles from historic gold mining operations there. So that, it's just that there are quite a range of potential pollutants that do impact lakes. And nationally, the Canadian Council of Ministers of Environment have a set of environmental quality guidelines that do set, maximum levels for protection of aquatic life or for industrial use of water, various reasons for the guidelines. And so whether HRM would be interested in trying to adopt any of those guideline levels as targets for our lakes and try to take steps to ensure that we don't exceed those guidelines, which, as I say, has already happened for arsenic in Lake Charles. And so my concern with Lake Charles would be whether that's going to migrate downstream, and start impacting other lakes, particularly if the levels are increased.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is the bread and butter of Shannon Miedema and Emma Waddy's work. I think they're on the call here. My understanding, so we are supporting their work in this direction 8.8 that you've pulled out. I believe there was a report to council around the Lake Bannock and Micmac areas, and this idea of a lake water management plan and the phosphorus loading limits came out of that report. So that's kind of my level of understanding of it. I don't know whether Shannon wants to provide any additional comment, but yes, all those points taken, and I'm sure they're listening.
Thanks.
All right, we can move on to David.
Hi. Yeah, thanks so much for the presentation. It's neat to see this coming together. I come from a background of sort of urban forest research, looking at hinterland forests now, but something that I paid some attention to in the past was stormwater management and what to do with water once it's on the ground in our cities. And just kind of tying that work in with the urban forest work or research that I did back in a previous life, it feels like. Just a comment, really, but the management of stormwater and working with the urban forest folks, and there's a phenomenal team at Halifax who are involved in urban forestry. Those are two not always sort of logically associated items, but the contribution of the urban forest to urban stormwater management is huge. And looking at strategies for managing stormwater once it's on the ground, and to Seo's point about preventing that runoff, the urban forest can make tremendous contributions there. So I'd encourage that those two items not be kept completely separate, but there's a real opportunity for bringing those two together in a way that would be quite advantageous. Another thing that, another completely off the cuff comment is I've noticed, I don't think that the regional plan update has ventured into this territory, but I've seen a trend recently in urban planning where some infrastructure like bus lanes, for example, are now starting to catch the moniker of green infrastructure because they're eco-friendly and they're starting to get the green tag in front of it. And having done some stormwater management research myself in the past, and that kind of bugs me and other people I know. So if it's not found its way into the regional plan, then kudos, and I encourage you to keep that going, because I think that that's a distinction that should be kept within the urban planning community, that a bus lane isn't green simply because it's environmentally friendlier than cars. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much for those comments. I agree, and certainly terminology is really, really important. Yes, and even around landscaping, you know, I gave the example earlier of, in our land use bylaw saying that you have to have a certain amount of landscaping, but we often didn't define landscaping, so it became paver stones, which doesn't do the same thing, right? So yes, it's important that we think about these things and have the terminology right.
Okay, thank you. Andrew?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Actually, sorry. UG is next on the list, but hold your thoughts. UG, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Sure. Yeah. First of all, thank you. This is, I think this is a great first step in terms of kind of planning the future of Halifax. Halifax has the ambition of growing our population to 550,000 to by the year of 2031. So great to have some plans there. I come from a background of innovation, working for Canada's Ocean Supercluster here in Dartmouth. So I have a few questions regarding this plan. One is that how does this plan or policy framework work with other jurisdictions? For example, on a lot of coastal facility are under federal jurisdiction. For example, we work at the Cove Center for Ocean Venture Entrepreneurship, and as well Port Authority, Halifax Port Authority. There's a lot of new development going on in our sector. How does this policy framework interact? And I think a lot of coordination can happen in a very positive way. And my second question is regarding kind of impact measurements. Is there any plan measuring the impact of this kind of policy framework? I know Halifax Partnership does an index lunch every year. They do pretty interesting impact measurement. Is there any coordination there? Just wondering.
Great, thank you for the questions. So in terms of how it works with other jurisdictions, so I mean, you're probably aware that the municipal government is the sort of lowest on the totem pole. So from like a regulatory perspective, where you know, the HRM charter is what sets out our legislative abilities, the things that we can do, and then you know, we're also subject to federal regulation. But you bring up a point in that question about partnerships, and that's a really key thing, is that you know, we can set out intent to work with other levels of government and community groups. And so yeah, it's a bit about paying attention to what everybody is doing and then trying to make sure that we're all kind of rowing in the same direction. In terms of the question about how do we measure and how do we measure the impact? So the regional plan does include a list of indicators, key performance indicators. It isn't captured in the themes and directions document, but it is one of my pet projects that I would like to update those indicators. That some of them are great and they're very similar to the same types of things that we are tracking through, I guess that the Halifax Index would be tracking, but also that the municipality tracks through our strategic priorities plan, I think is what they call it. It's sort of like a report to council every year. So we have some of those indicators set out, but then there are some indicators that are in the back of the regional plan that are like not that helpful. It's just like counting things that don't tell you anything. So it's definitely a goal through this project to update those indicators and then get organized around our data. And we have a really good team of, they're called Social and Economic Research. Emily Prote, who's on the core team of this work, is working very closely with us. And so we'll work closely with them to sort of update. So yes, it's absolutely a part of the plan to track and get better at data collection over time.
Great, thank you. Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Leah. I just wanted to ask about the provisions in here that discuss riparian buffers. It's mentioned that the bylaws suggest a requirement of 20 meters. And then I guess in section 8.10, it says to review and revise existing regulations in riparian areas. I wonder if you could just explain that a bit, because if the buffers are actually 20 meters, that is, mid-range recommendations, can vary between 10 and 30, 30 being, the ideal, and then 10 being the minimum. I think that maybe I don't quite understand the wording there. Are you suggesting that it's because of amalgamation that there might be differences in the riparian buffers across the different zones of now HRM, and that there'd be an attempt to standardize those?
Yes, that's exactly it. And the Halifax Green Network Plan also had a specific action that suggested an approach that was about increasing the buffer overall for wider water courses, and then doing this sort of standardization, because there are some places across the municipality where we have these sort of old regulations and we need a bit more standardization. So yes, to both those things.
Okay, yeah, I figured that must have been what it was actually getting at, because it sounds like you might lower them in the wording in that document. The other question I had is that I noticed that there's nothing about drainage in here, and I think that might be something to revisit, especially when you're discussing stormwater management. It's not just stormwater management, it would be regular drainage, especially around roads, and that would be pretty important in the winter, obviously, for salt, and draining that away from water, lakes and rivers. At the moment, there are roads that are actually draining into lakes and rivers just by the grading of them. They're sloped towards those water bodies. And so culverts would be one item that I think that really should be looked at. And obviously they will provide stormwater management. They are normally part of that process. But beyond just stormwater management, just the drainage network right now in HRM is very inconsistent, again, because of the amalgamation and different standards at the time of developments. And I think that there really does need to be some discussion of just general drainage, and that would hit on multiple different aspects of the plan, both for stormwater management, but also for flood risk, and as well as reducing the amount of inputs to sensitive systems through the road network.
That's helpful, thank you. I suspect, though I can't speak with 100% confidence, that would be dealt with through the Red Book review, so the sort of engineering review of the requirements for our rights of way. And Halifax Water, as I understand it, is sort of responsible for that sort of public stormwater infrastructure, and they sit on our steering committee for this, so we can certainly discuss that with them. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I had a couple of comments and questions, so I'll go one at a time here. I guess my first one is pretty quick. I think I noticed in the open spaces issue paper a reference to environmental conservation zoning, but only for the Eastern Passage Cow Bay land use bylaw special management area. Could you clarify that a little bit?
Yeah, so we have the regional plan, which is region-wide, was adopted in 2006. Then we have the community level, or sometimes called secondary plan level plans. Most of those were adopted before amalgamation. And different things happen in different places. So where we do have some ability under the charter to regulate sensitive features like flood plains and marshy areas and that sort of thing, for whatever reason, that was done in the Eastern Passage area pretty extensively. There's this environmental conservation zone where they've actually sort of drawn a zone around wetland, for example. And that just hasn't happened as significantly in other plan areas. Does that answer that question? Yep. Great.
Yeah. So is it possible to use that same zoning mechanism throughout the region because because there's precedent for it in one specific land use bylaw area?
Yeah, it's definitely possible. It's just a phenomenal amount of work, right? Because it requires us to do, I probably wouldn't be able to just do what we've done in the Green Network Plan, which is this sort of desktop study of, well, we think there's a wetland there. You would need to be ground truthing that so that you're not zoning something where there isn't a thing. Our mapping is not always that great. So we need to be able to sort of say with confidence that, yes, definitely this is an area where there's a feature we want to protect. And our municipality is the size of PEI. So we've got, lots of areas. But if there are, if we were doing a more intensive planning exercise in a specific area, so the regional plan sort of sets out where what we're calling future service communities are, and we would expect that before or as part of the beginning of the planning for that, we would do a land suitability assessment. So you would potentially be actually doing that ground truthing, going out, and then you could be drawing lines and zoning the things that you wanted to protect with that conservation zone. So it's certainly possible. It just may be too much of an exercise for the whole municipality, but for focused areas where there's a risk from development, then definitely.
Okay, interesting. And I also was looking for some clarification around the open space and natural areas designation. And I know that it encompasses not just areas for conservation, it's also agricultural use and resource extraction, and just in general, not the built infrastructure environment. Can that also be used to conserve additional areas, or does that more apply to protected area designations given by other jurisdictions like provincial parks and land trust reserves, things like that?
Yeah, so that designation, or really any designation, is like a policy level thing. It's not a regulatory tool. So you set out the designation, and it's sort of in general saying this is an open space and natural resource area, and then you implement that through zoning on the ground. So in some cases, that zone, you might have 25 zones that live underneath that designation, and it's really the zone on the ground where your limitations for development happen. The way that the regional plan works right now is that open space designation is applied to lots of different types of land, both public and private. As you say, also sort of like working landscape type uses. And there is an implementation tool in our regional subdivision bylaw, and I'm hoping I'm getting this right because I'm going from memory, but the regional subdivision bylaw does have a provision that you can't subdivide or build new roads for residential development in this designation. So there are sort of tools there, and that's not a zoning thing, that's a policy to a subdivision regulation. But it works in different ways. So it really you have to be pretty clear about what the outcome you're trying to get at, and then use the right tool for it.
Okay, interesting. Okay, I had a couple other questions. I was looking for clarity also around point 8.1, and that's adopt regional plan policy requiring that the Green Network ecology map is used to help guide regional planning decisions. And it's great to see the Green Network plan mentioned so many times in this report, because obviously so much effort and time went into the creation of that report, but it's not yet used to guide any planning decisions. So it's exciting to see that might be able to happen with this update to the regional plan. But the map as it stands now, with the different corridors identified, as you mentioned earlier in your presentation, I think it's more of a high level. In general, these are ecologically important areas. Is there also going to be more of a detailed planning effort to identify specific polygons on the map that will then be protected as no development areas, kind of like the green belt in Ontario kind of framework, or will it be more used to identify areas where there'll be different planning tools or different development allowed, or how exactly will the Green Network Ecology Map inform planning decisions?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, that map is it's very dense, right? It includes a whole lot of different pieces of information on it, and we'll use it, I think, in a range of ways. So at a really high level, it's when we are doing all of our planning work, thinking about where future housing and employment growth would go, let's remember that we have this map that helps us make some decisions about what's, a valuable ecological area. And it's almost like a trigger. So if there's an area identified on that map that's this is an area of high ecological value, then we know that we have some work to do. So that's, at a basic level, any sort of planning exercise, it's just one level of layer of policy where we need to consider the environmental features on the land before we kind of move forward. Another piece we might pull out is the wildlife corridors. So that map also has those wildlife corridors on it. I talked in the presentation a bit about how they're sort of region wide, they're at a high level, but we need to do some more work to understand how they would work on the ground. So that's probably a piece of setting up future study. I think we have some more work to do through this process to figure out sort of your last question around, are we actually going to be able to, change the designations or zoning on the ground just based out of that map? I think I don't know the answer to that yet, but we need to sort of go away and do a bit more work and compare the Green Network Plan map to the open space and natural resources designation, see where the overlaps are and aren't, and then figure out what might need to be changed. And that's just another piece of work. So there's many layers of things that I would say, and this is that 8.1 direction is almost like the catch-all of hey, there's this map, it really, really matters, and let's make sure we're considering it in all the various different ways that we need to. But I see that map as being the sort of key piece to help us figure out all the others.
Okay, great, thank you. With regards to the natural and green infrastructure piece that a lot of people have talked about already, I often see natural and green infrastructure used interchangeably. And generally, natural infrastructure refers to natural features like wetlands and forests, and then the green infrastructure, things like built features meant to mimic those natural features like bioswales, rain gardens, and naturalized stormwater ponds that are constructed specifically to deal with stormwater. So sometimes when they're conflated or used together in the same sentence, it kind of makes it sound like we can use natural infrastructure or natural assets to manage our stormwater. And I think in the broader watershed sense, that's true, in that in a healthy watershed, we have all these natural assets that protect us. But I often see cases where there's stormwater pipes that flow directly into natural features like wetlands, and that degrades their function over time. And I think is not, it's discouraged in the provincial wetland policy as well. So it'd be great to see some direction around deliberately having a built green infrastructure approach to increasing the quality of the stormwater runoff that's not relying on these natural features that increasingly are becoming degraded over time.
Thank you, that's really useful. Yeah.
Cool. Another comment, and this will be my last one, then we can return it back to anyone else who'd like to add anything. It would be great to see emphasis on increased flood risk mapping zones. So right now, I think the only updated flood map is for the Sackville River. And there are obviously other areas in the municipality that experience flooding. So it would be great to see more effort going into more flood risk mapping, and then to see that maybe tied to the goal of protecting those natural assets within those flood risk mapped flood risk areas through the existing flood map zoning that you've mentioned, in order to decrease the damage to infrastructure in those areas. And then lastly, I was excited to see a couple of mentions in there of protecting wetlands and finding out better ways to protect them. I know that wetlands and other waterways are tricky municipally because they typically fall under provincial jurisdiction. So I'm excited to see what a creative municipal approach will be to protect those features.
Me too. Thank you.
Great. So at this time, does anyone else want to comment or add or ask any further questions? Seo.
Just further on the quality quantity stormwater issue, one of the biggest mistakes that municipalities everywhere have made in the past is not segregating the stormwater from the sewage systems. And I think that might even in a high level policy document, that one might be important enough to mention specifically that we won't be making that mistake again of not segregating stormwater and sewage pipes. Hopefully, I hope that's the intent.
Yeah, I'm sure that speaks to Halifax Water's regulations, and I expect that's in theirs, but I couldn't speak for them. But certainly it's something I can check. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I should also add that, as Leah mentioned before her presentation, we do have the option of submitting a written report directly to the regional plan committee, or as any member of the public, you can always submit your own feedback through the Shape Your City website until July 16th, I believe. But if more thoughts come to you over the next month, then please reach out and we can certainly prepare a written report. I know sometimes it's easier to think on things a little bit longer and put ideas down into writing. And we'll also likely have time at our July meeting, I believe that will fall before July 16th. If we want to prepare any, if you would like to prepare any additional thoughts for that meeting, then we can maybe wrap it up into a written submission at that time, because it was certainly a large document and you may need another month to digest it.
We are continuing to meet with other committees probably later until July. So if you meet at your July meeting and then want to pull something together, like, don't worry if it's a few days after. Like, if it's later in July, that's also fine.
Okay, great. I was also just wondering, Leah, at the Q&A on environment and the one on climate change, I guess, on the 15th, would that be a presentation like the one you gave tonight and then a similar kind of question and answer period?
Yes, with probably a bit extra on, we'll have a representative from Parks, so we may be able to answer a few more questions on sort of parkland, and that person's also the naturalization person, so she'll have some answers there. But yes, generally I think it will be mostly this presentation on the environment piece, and the climate one will focus on the climate theme and also Halifax generally.
Okay, great. Maybe I'll take that evening one out of my calendar then. Okay, well, if there are no more comments or questions at this time, okay. Thank you so much for presenting, and to the rest of your team for coming out tonight. We really appreciate your time. And I found the report very well prepared, and there was a lot of times where I was going through, I was like, oh, they missed this, and then the next page it would be there. So I thought it was very comprehensive, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes of this engagement process and to see what comes of the next year. It's an exciting process if you're into regional planning. But yeah. So, yeah, you're welcome to stick around for the remainder of the meeting, or you can leave, I guess, if no one has any more comments or questions. So we'll move on now to number 10, added items. So 10.1, contamination at Lake Charles. So to kick us off for this item, I'll ask Seo to provide some context and some background on this issue.
Well, not a whole lot of context and background other than to say that there was an article published recently that raised the question of whether the sediment in Lake Charles, which is in some areas exceeding standards for arsenic by 1,000 times, was perhaps seeping upwards. And, following that, I went to see, other articles, etc., about this issue in the Montague mines, etc. And the city staff, Haruka, sent some, and I think you sent me some documents as well, which I went through. I'm the one who suggested this be put on the agenda, largely because of my reaction to these reports, which were quite disturbing in the way that they were written. Having read the documents that were provided to me, and I think those were circulated more broadly, I'd say that my comfort level that the province and the municipality are taking this very seriously is there. So if others want to peruse those same materials, I think everybody has the same materials now, or if they don't, perhaps you could share them more broadly. But I think they were shared with everyone. Then, if anyone wants to bring this back, that would be fine. But I would have to say at this point, I feel comfortable. So. If this had happened all a bit earlier in the process, I might not have even suggested this item.
All right, thanks for that. So we can go through the list again, and if anyone would like to comment or discuss anything, we can start by doing that. Tony?
Well, just a very quick comment, which I kind of alluded to before, is that, we do know that Lake Charles, based on the available data, has exceeded the arsenic guideline for protection of aquatic life. The two downstream lakes, Micmac and Fletcher's Lake, I think, haven't yet. They are pretty much at the guideline level, but haven't really exceeded it. So my concern would just be in future, that it does need to be monitored and tracked, and it's possible that if levels in Lake Charles get high enough, it's kind of the headwaters for the Shuby system. It drains south into Micmac and north into Lake Fletcher. And so the levels of arsenic could start migrating into those lakes as well. And that would obviously heighten the concern.
Thank you. David? No? Okay. Yuji. Any comments?
Sure. I'm aware of this issue for quite some time now. Gold mining tailing problem has been a longstanding issue here in Nova Scotia. I know that the past chair of this committee, Dr. Linda Campbell, has done a fair bit of work around this issue in terms of studying the environmental impact and also remediation of these gold mining tailing issue. a few comments from me, I guess. One is that I wonder if we could potentially, seek advice from, academics and expertise who are actually subject matter expertise around this issue to speak about it. I agree with CEO that on a lot of times these reports out in the media can be written in a pretty disturbing way, and it kind of raises a lot of public concern and awareness. And then the researchers who are working around this issue might not necessarily even have a very solid answer because there are a lot of scientific unknowns there. And I'm not an expert around this issue, but I think it's important to seek expertise around this issue.
I might just pipe in for a second if I can, Emma, because I am aware that the Nova Scotia Lands Inc. is planning a public engagement period once they're ready to kind of do that with their proposed approach for the Montague Gold Mine. And so I can't remember the exact months that they were looking at. It was supposed to have already happened, but there were some delays because of COVID. So just to flag that there is going to be a public engagement period around the closure proposal for the gold mine. And part of that could be Nova Scotia Lands and the consultants doing a little bit of a roadshow similar to what the regional plan group is doing. I'm not sure what the scope is, but I can certainly take that back to Nova Scotia Lands Inc. and ask the question if they have any more details on their public engagement approach, and I can maybe suggest that they present to this committee if that's something of interest.
Thank you. Andrew?
Yeah, so I've read the study and I do understand the context of both the methods and the results that are presented. It is my field, and so I guess I'm subject matter expert, I guess. I am concerned about this because knowing the context in Nova Scotia Lakes, the issue primarily is that you've had a long time in which there have been contaminants entering a system that primarily is an oxygenated system. So there's not been issues of high phosphorus loading or anoxic conditions in the summer, or anything that would cause a redox reaction within the lake to release the arsenic into the water column. So basically what happens is that if you've got a healthy natural system in a temperate zone or a coastal area like Atlantic Canada that's not subject to eutrophic conditions in the summer, then the algal production will sequester arsenic from the water column. So it doesn't matter if there's contamination coming into a lake, the algal communities sequester that, and it basically falls down into the sediments and becomes a portion of the sediment matrix. That's all fine and good until the system becomes anoxic. So if there is a depletion of oxygen, either because of a strong summer thermocline as well as nutrient loading in that particular year, in which you would have an anoxic layer in your lake, that will redox the arsenic out of the sediments and back into the water column. So because you've had now a history of contamination, that's kind of like within your matrix, your storybook of the past. And it's fine and it's sequestered there as long as that system does stay oxygenated. And that's the concern that I have, is that if you have development continuing around this basin, you're going to have a higher phosphorus loading. It's just a fact of development. And so there'll have to be some really well thought out understanding that the more development that you have in that lake catchment, the more input of nutrients you will have. And with warming, especially in the region, going to have a stronger summer thermocline. You're going to have a longer period of time in which you could deplete the oxygen in that hypolimnetic layer of Lake Charles, and that just increases the probability of that redox flux of arsenic into the water column, and that can be actually quite dangerous. And that is something to be particularly concerned about, because there's no good way of removing that history of contamination. It's not feasible in my recollection in a North American context, except if you dredge the whole lake, and I don't think that's going to happen. However, management of inputs to that lake and making sure that it does not have a strong anoxic period is going to be something that will have to be taken into serious consideration, because that could be a positive feedback mechanism, basically. If it continues, or if it had a longer period of time in which the lake suffered anoxic conditions, it could become eutrophic, and that would basically just be now a source of arsenic pollution that could actually be transported elsewhere, as well as not necessarily just in the lake.
Go ahead, Seo.
Yeah, I think Andrew's just convinced me that we do need to keep this on the agenda. Previously, my concern was, as had been raised in a series of articles, what if we disturb this arsenic and it ends up flowing down the creeks and into Lake Charles? And that was the concern. And the materials that were provided addressed that concern, and reassured me that right now the arsenic problem is not serious. But what Andrew just said points to the interaction effect between more phosphorus loading, which is, I agree, completely inevitable with more development, interacting with all of the other factors that Andrew mentioned to perhaps raise the arsenic out of the lake bed. So that's a concern, I think, that needs to be taken seriously and taken into account in the decisions of whether or not to permit development in that area.
And Seo, you're right. And one of the things that came across my desk today was a study that was just published in Nature, saying that with warming, all of the world's lakes are becoming less oxygenated. So they're veering towards that, especially in the summer. Normally, lakes have a density difference in water in the summer periods. If that density difference becomes much, much longer in a period of time, you basically eliminate any kind of flow of oxygen to the bottom of lakes. And the longer that time period is there, that means now you have a longer period of time for that redox of arsenite out of the water column. And that's the danger, right? Is that if these systems are already becoming depleted in oxygen just because of things like climate change and natural conditions, anything additional is going to be not great in terms of making that condition a serious problem.
Okay, thanks everyone for your comments. Would anyone else like to add? I guess I'll just say as well, with this being an added agenda item, it's a bit different in that we're not sending these comments or recommendations directly up to the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee, or necessarily formally informing staff work. However, these meetings are public, and the meeting minutes are all made public. So it's important to bring up these issues so that the public is aware of them through these meetings. So Shannon, I think you mentioned that perhaps in future stages of this, as this project progresses, and I understand that both the municipality and various provincial departments are quite busy dealing with this issue, and I'm sure have taken into account many different factors, but you mentioned that there might be a potential for one of the groups involved to present to the committee at a later time. Is that right?
Yeah, I can just take it back to Nova Scotia Lands Inc. and figure out what their intentions are for the public engagement. And I can even pose the question of whether they'd consider a presentation to the Regional Watershed Advisory Board if you'd like. I can just do that, probably without anything formal required, unless Haruka tells me otherwise.
Okay, yeah, it sounds like there's definitely some good expertise on this board that are keen to, or experts, I should say, with expertise that are keen to present more information and hear from Nova Scotia Lands and maybe provide some recommendations. So thank you for doing that and for offering to do that. Are there any other comments or questions on this issue? All right, well, that's the end of our agenda. Sorry, I just saw Sharon unmuted herself. I'm not sure if she needed to pop it. No, she's muted. Okay, so the date of our next meeting is Thursday, July 8th. And that is it for this evening. So in order to adjourn, I'll just need a mover. Seo, thank you. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening and the rest of your June. Good luck. Thanks.
Right.
Thank you.